Welcome again to another edition of the Gary Plock Tennis Show. I'm here with my house guest, Lloyd Emanuel, who is the commish in New York, a legendary tennis pro and Columbia Lion tennis player, and also knows more people in tennis than I think anybody in the world. And we had so much fun last night with a guy that's probably known as one of the biggest characters in tennis, combined with being a great tennis player in the past, and that's Steve Siegal. And
I'll add also, Gary, that he's one of the most beloved. He is so well liked and loved by tennis players literally around the world.
Well, we've talked, Steve and I have talked before a time or two, but I've heard so many more stories from everybody. And tonight we're going to continue and find out some stories about some of the people that he played with and some of his observations. Steve, great to have you again tonight from down in Houston, Texas, I believe, for the moment.
Yes, great to be here with you guys. I had so much fun last night, and I'm looking forward to some more conversations tonight.
You got some phone calls and texts and responses on Facebook. I think people were saying more. So here we are.
Right. Well, Lloyd, go ahead, Steve.
No, I'm just very happy because a lot of them didn't realize that we did it yesterday. They said, "When did you do that podcast? When you moved to Houston?" I said, "Well, I've been in Houston 6 years now. I did it about 10 hours ago."
Right. Yeah, it was great. It was terrific.
Steve, let me start off by asking you a question, and know that you're a little bit older, and I'm 3 years older than John McEnroe. But what experiences did you have with John McEnroe?
Well, the thing is, there's a 10-year difference.
Right.
So I never played him in singles. I played him one time in doubles with Willie Guillermo Oropez, who was a doubles partner.
Good player.
And we played a 17-year-old, I think, John McEnroe, and a 17-year-old Peter Renner. And it was not a good experience. We went down, and it wasn't a lot of fun.
Why wasn't it a lot of fun?
Both of them had very good lefty serves, and you knew they were going to be really good. I didn't quite think he was going to win Wimbledon in the U.S. Open, but that was really my only experience because he really was enough younger than me, and when he got to be good, he was on a completely different level. So that was my only encounter with Mac.
Wasn't he only 17 when he got he went from the qualies to the semis of Wimbledon? Wasn't it when he was an incoming freshman at UCLA at Stanford?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I played him. He played a junior tournament in Shelter Rock, and then came over and played me the year that the U.S. Open was dumping all that clay on Forest Hills, and they had the qualies out on Long Island, and I played him. Must have been 10 minutes from his house, a place called Glen Head.
Sure.
And that was the end of the summer before the Wimbledon from the next year. So he was either 17 or 18.
He was not yet enrolled.
He may have been 17
at Stanford, unless it was after his freshman. How many years did he stay at Stanford?
He came to Stanford. He'd already made the semis. Okay. So you're right. He played 1 year at Stanford.
I might add also, because on my Facebook page I acknowledge birthdays, that I happen to know that today is Johnny Mac's 65th birthday.
Happy birthday, Johnny Mac.
65 today.
Welcome to Social Security. I know you need the money.
You're going to be collecting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I'll just never forget. I'll say one more thing, that when we'd have the Easter Bowl or Port Washington Classic, and then later the Junior Davis Cup tryouts, I remember Buddy Gallagher, who I was staying with in Larchmont, say, "Hey, come over and see this 12-year-old kid. I really think he's going to be good." And it was McEnroe back in that day.
I want to say one more thing, and then we should move on. But I want anybody in this podcast right now who has a win over John McEnroe to please raise his hand. Gary.
Doubles, not singles. Singles, I didn't do too well with him, but one day got him in doubles.
But Steve, you played. I mean, you had so many vast experiences. And by the way, when I said that you're beloved around the world, I wasn't joking, because Bill Lloyd always chimes in from Australia for his
Oh,
beloved.
is that right?
Oh my gosh, he loves Siegs. He loves him, right, Steve?
Well, Bill Lloyd played for Southern Illinois.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I met him when Miami played Southern Illinois. And we got friendly, and then we spent a lot of time in Europe together.
Tell Gary what he always, when you would try to get a scouting report from Lloyd, what would he say?
This was the best. He knew everybody. And according to him, when you asked him about, a great player, he'd have this little laugh, and he'd go, "Oh, guy can't play." Oh, after about 6 of these, I said to him, "Hey, Bill, what do you say when people ask about me?" And he got real quiet. So, it was too much. And he'd give you like one piece of advice. He goes, goes cross court every time on his backhand. Goes down the line on the backboard. There's no backhand. I mean, it'd be one quote, and you know what? He was right every time.
Well, let's get into some of these Eastern players. How about Mac's partner, who's much younger than you also, Peter Fleming, but a little bit closer to your age. Did you ever play with Peter?
I lost to Peter in the qualifying for the Canadian Open, and he had a great all-around game. Again, much younger than me. My buddy Jeff Miller had a lot more matches with him. But Peter, I believe, went 1 year to Michigan.
That's right.
And then he transferred to, was it UCLA?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So I was impressed when I played him how good his ground strokes were. I mean, this guy really, he had a complete game and just got better and better.
He did. He had great ground strokes.
He really did.
How about a great pal of ours, Dickie Stockton?
Oh, I mean, this guy won every junior tournament sectionally and nationally. And we have a 65 or 70-year relationship. And one great story about Dickie was I was 13, and I'm pretty sure I was going to be one in the East that year. He was 10, and we played at Bronxville, and he beat me love and love. And to this day, anytime I see Dickie, he'll say, "Hey, Steve, remember Bronxville?" So what's really amazing is it turns out that he married someone from Bronxville whose dad was the pro at the club.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Is that right, Liz?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about that? And her sister married Ronnie Barnes.
Oh, right. So
Who was also in Bronxville.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Dickie was, everybody knows he had the best overhead, he had the best backhand, he was the best doubles player. Just had such a mature game at such a young age. I can't say enough good things about him.
And then goes on to win NCAAs as well. It's not like he just had a junior career, and not to mention the pros.
Davis Cup.
Won the U.S. Indoor.
I was at that tournament. I watched them beat Connors in the final. I happened to be at that tournament just coincidentally.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's move on to some other players. We'll start with some Eastern players. How about King Van Nostrand?
Oh, King was amazing because, he was old enough that he couldn't play tournaments because he was a teaching pro. So he lost about 10 years where he could only play in professional tournaments, and there were almost none.
Really?
And then what happened was when he got to be about 30 years old, Open tennis came around, and he just started dominating in the men's in the East and all the senior divisions, sectionally and nationally. I mean, he's got more gold balls probably than almost everybody but Jimmy Parker.
He really glided over the court. He moved. I've never seen anyone move on a court like him. He literally glided. It was like he was bounding. His feet barely touched the ground, and he's moving around.
When you played King Van Nostrand, you had to play a great point to win a point.
Yeah.
Because he gave you nothing. If you hit the ball short, he was all over the net. I mean, you know, he just had one of those complete games where he was happy to stay back and he was happy to come in. And I wasn't happy to play him. That's all I can tell you. He was a tough out.
And his offspring certainly were very accomplished as well, although his son had one of his sons had a sad demise. But Molly was a quarterfinalist at Wimbledon.
Was she?
And John was well on his way to a pro career.
What about Ricky Meyer?
Oh, Ricky just got better with age.
He did,
You know,
didn't he?
He always had a big serve, but you know the rest of his game just got better with age. You know, he had all kinds of wins. I mean, I think he beat Nastasi, and I think he had 2 wins maybe over Panada. I mean, you know, his pro career was just it just blossomed. Had that famous match at the Open, I think 3rd round when
McEnroe on the grandstand court, yeah.
Yeah. So
Had a real fluid motion on his serve.
And
I don't think when Ricky went to Penn, anybody had an idea that he was going to have the pro career that he had.
Yeah, I agree. How about, did you ever play Gene Scott?
I did. I played Gene on grass at Newport. I think he was
very comfortable on grass, no doubt.
Yeah, I lost in 2 close sets, but he was the much better grass court player. And I actually played him when I was a sophomore in high school in Waldwick, New Jersey, on the Eastern Indoors. And he beat me on clay also. He was really Mr. Smoothie.
Yeah, what a
player.
Beautiful game he had. What about Herbie Fitzgibbon?
You're naming all my nightmares.
By the way,
I played
hold on. At least 3 or 4 of the first 6 guys we brought up, Gary. Steve's very modest. He has wins over at least, and we're not going to name names, but he has wins over quite a number of these first 5 or 6 players we named. Is that fair to say, Steve?
Well, it's fair to say that I never beat Herb Fitzgibbon. Let's just go there. The over-under there was 2 games a set.
Really? He's tough, huh?
Let me just say this to you. When you played Herb Fitzgibbon, you hoped he got his first serve in because the second serve was over your head.
Oh, gee.
Wow.
And then no matter where you hit the ball, you were looking at a forehand.
Right. He was serve. He was the original serve +1.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. You know, he was he played kind of similar to Frank Froelich, you know, and he just was a beast. I mean, this guy beat Manuel Santana on clay.
Wow.
To give you an idea. So
wow.
Herbie was, you know, besides being a great high school and collegiate player, I think Herbie got to 14 in the world.
Yeah, great player. What about Ron Holmberg? Did you ever lock horns with Ron?
Well, again, only knew of him. He grew up in Brooklyn, and he did play Eastern tournaments. But I think Ron was top 10 in the world for a few years.
I think he was.
And I think he had a win over Laver. I mean, I saw him play at Forest Hills. The guy was phenomenal. I mean, you know, probably one of the best players to ever come out of the East for sure.
How about Richard Raskin, a.k.a. Renee Richards?
Really tough lefty. I never played him, you know, but I played in a lot of men's tournaments as a young kid and watched him play a lot. He had a really tough lefty serve and just, you know, he was always a top 5 Eastern player in back in the day. You have to remember that the Eastern rankings had people like Ron Holmberg, Gene Scott, Herb Fitzgibbon, Clark Gravener, and Frank Froelich, because Eastern tournaments were played in Orange on the grass.
Yeah.
So if you played Orange and you played the Eastern clay courts, you were getting ranked based on that. And the Nassau Bowl was also in the East.
Yeah,
and so was Forest Hills.
Yeah, all the lead-ups to Forest Hills were the several grass
Sure.
pro tournaments.
Yeah.
And you compiled an Eastern record. That's correct.
Yeah, there were times when you had Gravener, Fitzgibbon, Ash, Gene Scott, all in the rankings.
Holmberg, yeah.
Butch Seawagon and Tony Vincent was a great player back in the day. And, later on we had John James, Bob Barker, Don Rubel.
So how about for you, Steve? Did you duke it out with Don Rubel?
What about Don Rubel?
Did you ever duke it out with Don Rubel and get a sense of his game?
Only played him when he was 45 and I was like 35.
Okay, all right.
And he had a really big game.
He had a big game. He moved in, right?
He was kind of like a miniature Dick Sabat. You know what I mean? Like, had great groundies on both sides and his, strong man. He just could crush the ball and hit big overheads, and he would have tuned me in the men's open for sure.
Huh. Wow, that's interesting. What about Michael Grant? Did you ever lock horns with him?
Luckily not. Only got killed by him in practice about 100 sets.
Oh, is that right? He likes to practice, doesn't he?
Yeah, he had a relative in Fairlawn, and I lived in Teaneck when I was teaching at the Teaneck Tennis Club. And he would come out there, and I was always hoping we'd practice where somebody couldn't see us. Because he just, he was anher one of my nemesis. Naming all my nemesis.
That's what I'm here for, Steve.
How about the Fishback brothers?
Had a lot of experience with both of them. I played Michael twice, and I played Peter about 4 or 5 times. And, Michael was really tough. He had 2 hands on both sides. Peter had the slice backhand and a huge forehand. Both of them could run like the wind. Really, really, really good players. Really tough.
That's interesting. You're talking about two-handers, Gene Mayer and Michael Fishback. Both of them had dads for tennis pros. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, well, and the interesting thing for me is that both dads raised 2 sons with vastly different styles of games.
Yeah, that's true.
And dad let each son develop his own style, which not every coach will do that. It can be very much, my way or the highway.
Good point.
How about?
Let me make one comment, because Jeannie played his own way, but Sandy was Alex.
Yeah. Okay.
He perfected the Mayer game.
But
serve and volley.
But Dr. Mayer.
The ball on the rise.
Yeah. But Dr. Mayer let Jeannie develop his own game, is the point.
Absolutely. But Sandy, man, he was a Dr. Mayer clinic.
Did you have experience on court with either of the Mayer brothers?
Yes. Practiced a lot with Gene, with his father coaching. So the practices weren't too long because they'd be screaming at each other after every point. And I lost to Sandy. I think we played once in the men's. I played a decent match against, but he beat me. He beat me like in 2 sets.
Wow. Well, Gene Mayer is definitely one.
Anybody I can beat.
But Gene's one of the most talented players I think I ever played against.
Steve, you have wins over more than half the guys we mentioned, and you're just being too modest. I happen to know this. Let me ask you a question.
Let's just leave it at this. I beat some of them, and most of them I lost to, and I had losing records to. So let's leave it at that.
How many, because you, unlike Steve Ross, who never played a junior match and was a very late comer to the game and untaught, self-taught, you travel, you played the junior circuit, your mom was driving you around. How many of these kids had private coaching versus how many of them had their dads coaching them? Because I know you ran into sort of both.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was like, I think almost every kid that I played against, had a pro that they worked with, but very, very few traveled with them or came to the matches. That was like, I had somebody that drove me to the tournaments that was, a coach. So people used to say that's Steve's coach, but he was more of a mentor, than an actual tennis pro.
That was Bob Fine?
Bob Feinberg.
Feinberg, yes. Yep.
Yes. He's the one who really discovered me, told me about ETA tournaments. Well, it was ELTA back in the day.
Right.
Eastern Lawn Tennis Association. And he took me to the tournaments and, and he was a big help to me because he always took me to Forest Hills and Orange. And we'd be there about 12 hours a day. And that's what really got me enthused, was watching great players up close. I would try to imitate them when I came home.
How are you able to adapt to grass, Steve, being such a clay court, tenacious kind of grunt,
Well, the thing that I was lucky because even growing up in the East, in the juniors, Huntington had a grass court tournament. So I'd play a little bit on that, and then I played a couple of times at Orange. And what I found was any volley was a good volley. So
Yeah.
you didn't have to be a great volleyer.
That's true.
All you had to do was hit a volley, and basically the shorter you hit it, the better it was.
Almost the weaker the weaker the volley. I mean, look at Matt. Look at Max. Look at Max.
And being small was a help because they weren't kicking the serves over my head on the grass, so I could get a good hit on the return of serve because it stayed low.
Interesting.
I had trouble with anything above my shoulder on the back.
Although we all remember from 24 hours ago, your first round match with Alan Stone when you went nameless for 2 3/4 sets on the grass.
That's true. But, I got pretty comfortable with it. I got to the last round of Wimbledon qualifying on grass. And, I won quite a few matches in England on grass. So,
Steve,
I would say that. Sorry.
You get measured sometimes by your best losses, like your Ash story last night is such a, it's a loss, but it's a great loss. And just personally, I number one of my great losses. I played Kramer at Newport, and I lost to him 5-3. And it was like, I was so proud of myself because he was so amazing.
Wow.
And I broke him a couple of times, but of course he broke me almost every time. And so I name that as one of my top 5 losses.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I think you breaking him twice is more than I ever did after many matches I played.
Yeah, he might have let up a little bit. I don't know. Yeah, I think he knew you were my buddy. So actually, I saw Bill Lloyd before the match. And he said, "No, he can't play. The guy can't play. You'll do fine."
Yeah, there's no forehand.
No forehand, no footwork. How about some of your Miami teammates? Dibbs, Pat, Raz.
Oh, listen, these guys were international players. Luis Garcia, played Davis Cup with Loyo Mayo and Marcelo Lara and Rafael Osuna. I mean, the guy was an international player at 17, 18 years old. And, with Pat Kramer, they won the NCAA doubles. He had a phenomenal record in singles. He played there 3 or 4 years. And
did you get to practice with your teammates? Which of your teammates did you get to practice with? I know you were a Chevy, and they were Lamborghinis, but I'm sure you got on the court occasionally with them.
Well, let me just say this: if you had 5 days of practice, by Friday you had no more confidence in your game at all. Because you just practiced with Pat Kramer, Luis Garcia, Eddie Dibbs, and Raz Reed, and it's like, I mean, people will say all the time, "Oh, it's great that you're playing with better players." Well, let me tell you something. It doesn't do a lot for your confidence.
Yeah, fair point.
Was Dale Lewis kind of just throwing the balls out and you guys would go play practice sets? Is that kind of the way he coached?
Well, Dale was a phenomenal recruiter, and, he ran the Orange Bowl. A lot of people don't know this, but Dale was a very successful coach at Indiana before he even got to Miami. He won the Big Ten many times. I think he has more collegiate wins probably almost than anybody. And he had a really good eye for the game. You know, he could recognize who had potential. But to be honest, there was not a lot of instruction because everybody was such a complete player.
Right.
But by the time they got there, sure.
He devised a lot of different drills for us to do.
And then he just filled out the lineup card, basically.
Well, that was the best thing. This is why he was known as Dirty Dale, because Dale carried a different lineup in every pocket. A lot of people don't know this. So he'd get up in front of the crowd and he'd say, "Welcome to Miami Tennis. We're playing the Florida Gators today." And then the coach from Florida would hand him the uniform. I mean, the lineup.
He'd look at it.
We'd look at it and we'd go into either his breast pocket or his
That's
a great story. That's a great story.
So he had a lineup with 5 different lineups.
How about Steve? How about the first coach ever of the Miami Hurricanes, Gar Malloy? Interact with Gar over the years?
Gardner was something really, really special. I've got one great Gardner story for you if you have a minute.
Go ahead.
So Gardner, you know, the worse Gardner treated you, the more he really liked you. So he gave me a lot of grief. You know, he'd see me at Henderson Park and he'd go, "Well, Siegal, do you want to lose on clay? Do you want to lose on a hard court? Do you want to lose on the carpet?" And he goes, "If we play on clay, you got to sweep the court." I mean, he was in his 50s, and I could never. Maybe I won one set in the whole year I was at Miami-Dade. He just tuned me all the time. And then, you know, I tell him I was trying to play pro tennis, and I knew he was kind of laughing under his breath. So what happens, right? I'm with Butch Seawagon and Abby Siegel. We're in England. And they have a thing in England before Wimbledon at Hurlingham Club. It's the Garden Club or Garden Party or whatever it is. And you can only go there if you're in the draw. And somehow Seawagon talks me to go in. And I'm walking around the grounds, and there's Gardner, and he's talking to like Don Budge, Jack Kramer, Vic Seixas, and I'm just trying to stay out of the way. I just don't want to see him. I just don't want to see him.
Because you don't really belong there.
I don't belong there.
Seawagon's dragged you into this party.
Yeah, he's, you know, come along for the ride, you know. And I'm trying not to, and all of a sudden, he spots me. And he goes, "Is that Siegal? What the hell are you doing here?"
That's funny.
I let you in, man. I was getting more and more like embarrassed.
But he loved you, right? He loved you.
He came over, gave me a hug. You know, and I mean, I can't say enough good things about the guy because, like I said to you, he gave me a lot of crap, but he really liked me. You know, he was happy that I was there.
One last story from England. Quickly recount the Lenny Schloss practice court story.
Oh, Lenny.
Do you know Lenny?
Lenny, forgive me for telling this story.
Yeah, he won't hear this podcast.
Okay. So I'm in England, and I haven't gotten to play on grass to practice at all. I'm going to public parks. Like, you know, here I am trying to play the circuit, and I can't even get a hit in on the grass anywhere. And I run into Lenny. And Lenny, you know, had some huge wins and played doubles with Tommy Mosier. And, you know, he was a regular on the circuit. And he goes, "Oh, Steve, come with me to Queen's Club. I'll get you on the grass." So I said, "Great." So we go to Queen's Club, and there's all these players, you know, looking to get courts. And Lenny's got his 8 rackets, you know, and he looks really professional, and I'm kind of hiding behind him. And there was a guy like by the name of Colonel Pettigrew who was in charge of the court assignments.
At Queens.
So Lenny walks up there, and he goes, "Yeah, my friend, my buddy and I, we'd like to practice court on the grass." And he says, "What is your name?" And he goes, "Lenny Schloss." And he gets into his paperwork, and he goes, "I don't see you on the list, Mr. Schloss." And he goes, "Well, I'm a guest. And he goes, oh, who are you a guest of? He goes, I'm waiting for this, what's going to happen. And he goes, Roger Taylor. Now, at the time, Roger Taylor is the #1 British player. And this guy looked at Lenny, and he went, Mr. Schloss, Roger Taylor is an honorary member here. And quite frankly, you're making a mockery of the Queen's Club. Please leave. So, with that, Johnny Appleby, remember Johnny Appleby, Lloyd?
I remember from from
Their
where?
mom was a member. Their mom was a member, and she came over and said hello to me, and she got us a quart, of course, not in the grass.
Right.
But he wasn't very happy.
But you rescued Schloss, who was
I did rescue Schloss.
BSing you.
He was going to be escorted out for making a mockery.
It's funny.
And how about watch some of the, just quickly, your all-time great watch circuit plays. Last night you told us about Sherwood. You were so proud that he broke out. How about Turville?
Well, there was Bill Lofgren and Gene Malin and Tony Dawson and Ramiro Benavides. Steve Turner was a great player.
Yeah.
Roger Dowdeswell, Ben McGowan. They were great players on that.
And of course, Army Neely. But I still think your all-time win was over Peaches Barkowitz, Steve. I really am very impressed with that one.
Hey, you better stop it now, I was reluctant to bring that up last night. Don't start with that now.
She was a good one. Steve, thanks again for joining us on the Gary Plock Tennis Show. And I think we're going to have a round 3 with you in the near future. If I can get your cohort to come down to the Sunshine State a little more often, might even hire him as a sidekick. Who knows? Seems to be a little bit better than I am at it.
It's been a pleasure, gentlemen. I really appreciate the getting together, and I thank you for letting me be on your show.
No, your fans are loving it from all around the city.
They're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah, fans everywhere. Steve.
You're a star. Steve, thanks again for joining us. Look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Good night.